Tonight's guest is Chris Tucker. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and my little mockingbird companion in the tree has a lot of things to say, so...
I noticed that. Yeah, sounds like they do have a lot to say. Huh. It's a nice touch, though. I'm glad they're there. Chris?
Yeah.
Please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I am a 36-year-old female. My job is basically keeping the kids alive. Well, not keeping the kids alive part. I plan to get a job soon, but, that's just my occupation title, I tell everybody. I have lived in Texas my whole life. I live in Central Texas right now. I grew up in West Texas, a little town called Fort Stockton, an hour and a half south of Midland, Odessa, Texas, in case a lot of people don't know where Fort Stockton is. So just letting them know. But my current location, I don't mind, sharing, is Abilene, Texas. So they call it the Big Country. And when pre-kids, I used to get out in nature as much as I could. I still like to do that, but it's hard with little ones and teenagers trying to go do things, teenager things. So I hope to get back out more, like in wooded areas in the years down the road, and I paint on the side, so that's always fun.
Wow, Chris, you stay busy. Keeping the kids alive, that's a full-time job in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is. You were a teen when you had your first encounter. How far were you into your teens, though, when it happened?
I believe I was 16 or 17.
16 or 17. Did you take anything away from that experience, considering it happened at such a young age, to the point where you think it might have had long-lasting effects and wound up affecting the adult that you grew up to be?
I guess for the most part, growing up, my dad or my grandfather, they would say, if you're indecisive on something or something doesn't seem right, go with your gut instinct or your intuition. And when that encounter happened and feeling the need to, kind of move along and get out of there, or that something wasn't right, listening to that, and then, as I've grown, I've honed it a little bit better. So no one listens to me still. Sometimes I like to point that out, but I know I can more so believe in myself rather than other outside sources or anything that might be trying to say otherwise, I guess.
Well, it definitely sounds like you've come to terms with it, and as long as we can say that, that's definitely a good thing. And as far as trying to warn other people, you know what they say, you can lead a horse to water, and that's basically what we're talking about here. If they wind up having an encounter and paying the price because they didn't listen to you, then that's a them problem, not a you problem.
That's true.
That's right. You were taking the trash out at the time when it happened. Have you taken the trash out since after dark?
Not so much, because that's usually our one of our younger boys. We have 4 kids, and the 2 teens, that's their job. But one time he ran in, freaked out, saying he saw a werewolf in the alleyway. So there was still more trash to take out. So when I grabbed the trash and I was like, werewolf, no, we're in a very more populated area. So grabbing it, I still went out there defiantly. But yeah, I still do things. I joke I will probably die petting something I shouldn't. So,
Yeah, sounds like it. And you don't frighten easily. There's a werewolf outside, and you still go out there because you have trash to take out. That's pretty bold.
it was smelly.
What, the werewolf or the trash?
Oh, the trash.
Oh, okay, I've got you. Yeah, I figure that's what you're talking about. You lived in a home at one time that was over 100 years old. Did you ever have any supernatural experiences in it?
Oh, a lot. If you want me to, I can actually send you audio that my stepmother recorded. I'd never heard it in person, but they would hear old-timey music playing, and she finally recorded it. And it's pretty amazing, actually. So other than that, I've actually experienced a lot in that house.
Oh, I bet you have. I don't doubt that at all. Funny thing about those 100-plus-year-old homes, seems like they have a lot of activity like that in them.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about your first encounter, but I know you haven't told your husband about your second one. Have you told him about that first one yet? And if not, why haven't you?
I think I ended up telling him eventually after we spoke. And the reason was he doesn't experience paranormal things. He's very factual. We're polar opposites. You know, he's type A and I'm type B plus chaos. So, and he's more rational than I am. And so that was what made me not really, I guess, be more open to what I've experienced and encountered. And I've also been, but this was just for teenage problems. I've been in a psychiatric ward and I didn't want to go back.
Yeah, no one wants to. I don't blame you. What was the biggest reason why you contacted me, Chris?
Well, after listening to a few encounters and kind of remembering what the initial, like, I guess the one that was more impactful, which would be like the most recent at the lake, was kind of like, was this what I saw, you know, like, or I guess validation and just not to say to see if, you know, make sure I wasn't crazy, because what's real to some people might not be real to others and vice versa. But it started to weigh heavy on me, even as I would listen to other encounters, you know, that growing nag to reach out to you and talk to you grew and grew. So I bit the bullet and decided to contact you.
Well, it goes without saying, I'm so glad you did. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. If you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest on one of my 2 Bigfoot shows, please go to mybigfootsighting.com. All right, Chris, please tell us about your encounters now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay, well, I'll start from childhood and then the teenage up into the lake, because my ADHD brain will want to go off in other territories. I was 6 years old, I think, and this was when I was growing up in West Texas, and we lived out on the outskirts of town. And so when I say outskirts, when I would go out my front porch, open the gate, go on the street, and if I went to the west, which would be my right, and past a few houses, there was a ranch our neighbors owned, and then you would see the plateaus and just land for miles and miles. That was essentially kind of my backyard. So in a way, I grew up sort of a feral child. So I was used to being outdoors a lot growing up. bringing horny toads home as a pet. That was a weekly thing, and being told no. So, kind of giving you guys like a gist of just how it was growing up. So my grandmother would always make sure we would come in at night. And when I got older, she would always tell me, we don't really go out at night unless we have to, because if you venture out far, especially away from houses and stuff, El Lobo will get you. And that's the wolf, translated from Spanish. And I didn't really question her. I just pictured like a man wolf type looking thing, snatching kids up at night, kind of like La Llorona, that she also used as a scare tactic with me. So I didn't go out much at night, but I would play outside all the time. So I was 6 and I was in our front yard playing, and I'm trying to think what time of year it was. It's West Texas, live out in the desert, so it's kind of hot year round. But that probably doesn't matter. It was before sunset too. And so I was outside playing in the mud, doing my thing, and I felt like I was being watched. And so I kind of, went on alert. I turned to our house behind us, and I looked to see if, it was my grandparents. Then they were raising me, and my grandmother was that nosy neighbor looking through the blinds. I thought it was her. No. So I looked, kind of scanned to see if it was the neighbor across the street sitting on their porch, to wave, to be courteous. They weren't out there. And it was across the street from us, cat corner, I would say, to my left, this old adobe structure. And I remember it was like a very pale Pepto-Bismol pink looking kind of little structure. And the windows didn't have any screens, and the window edges were wood, and they were like a rotted wood. So it was old. I don't know how old it was, but it belonged to our neighbors. It wasn't developed. They were planning to knock that house or shack down. And when I say shack, think of your outdoor type shed where you store like your lawnmower and small lawn equipment, very small. So I didn't know when they were planning to knock it down and develop it, but just from my grandparents talking to them, that's what was in works. And it was brushy, like there was maybe like a small tree, nothing major, like a mesquite tree, and it was overgrown. And so this structure with the foundation, it was several feet high. So what drew my attention was to the window that was facing our house. And as I stated, there were just no screens, nothing. Even the door is like blacked out. Or not blacked out, but there's no door. But when I say blacked out, it was always dark in there. The neighbors rarely went into that little shed. And I want to say it was 2 or 3 years after this encounter was when they knocked it down and built on that land, that little piece of land. This is what stood out to me. And looking into the window, I could see these 2 glowing blue balls. I thought they were, glowing blue balls then. But looking back now, and with what I know, it was more of an eye shine, and it was staring back at me. And this window was probably 2 feet off the ground, and so the eye shine was 3 feet, from the ground. So not too tall. And as a kid, I'm 4'11" now as a grown adult, so I was pretty small then. That still seemed pretty big, but still small. I kind of froze and was puzzled, and I kind of looking back at that moment, that's the same energy or feeling that thing was projecting back at me. Like, what is this? What is this teacup human doing? So my grandfather came outside, called me back into the house because dinner was ready, and that was that. So the second encounter, I was a teen and I had moved in with my dad, and he remarried my stepmother. This is in Abilene. And so I left my grandparents, and they still had the house in Fort Stockton, so I visited frequently. So it was at night, and being the teen, it was my job to take the trash out. And we lived on a pretty populated street. This is the house that's 100 years old, so it had different houses go up around it, and it's more centralized than my past location. And so I'm taking the trash out. It's a nice night, and I'm kind of enjoying the night, the cool air and whatnot. And I have to take the trash to the little dumpster that you usually wheel down to the end of your street for the dumpster to come grab it. And I had set the trash down so I can open the lid, and I looked up just like a brief moment, and down the street, a couple of houses down, I could see this man walking with a dog on his side. And I figured neighbor walking down the street, they're just going about. And I bent down to grab the trash and make sure nothing was left on the ground, and threw it in there, and I closed the lid, and I glanced up, and this man that was walking his dog, well, he was still there walking. They were going away from us, or away from our house. The dog that was walking beside him, which to me looked like a large dog, was suddenly a person walking. And that kind of spooked me, because I kind of questioned for a moment, like, did I see that? Or maybe it was, drug addicts. I'm not sure, because who knows? I kind of shook it off and just walked back into the house. And I got ready for bed and went ahead and fell asleep. And this is when I had that dream. I was back in my hometown, back in my childhood home. And my room that I was in as a child faced that plateau I had described in the first encounter. So it was facing the west. And in the dream, I was asleep in the bed, and just this large clawed hand reaches out of the screen and grabs my back and starts pulling me out of the window. And I wake up kind of like, whoa. And to me, when I woke up, it felt like those dreams you have when you're falling and I guess your body moves or twitches and you kind of, you jolt awake. That's what it felt like, but I didn't have that sense of a nightmare. So I got up to use the restroom and it was morning by then. So I was going to be up for the day. And I was just going about my business and I wasn't even thinking on that dream at all. And I started to feel like this burning sensation on my back, like that exact portion where I was scratched. And I checked and I didn't have any marks or anything. And I'm not one to really claw at myself in my sleep. So that didn't occur that maybe I did that. But I just thought that was really odd with seeing the person with the dog walking. And then all of a sudden, after a few seconds, it was two people walking and then having this dream. And so my brain was like, well, I'm just trying to put two and two together and like, oh, well, it's a werewolf and that's why you had this nightmare. So later on that day, I had gone outside to sketch. It was a nice day. And that house sits on like maybe half an acre. It's a fairly decent sized property. So, I could wander around and I'd finished sketching and I decided to go back into the house. And I'm very clumsy, so I'm always looking at the ground to see where I'm going. And I was walking, and as soon as I left where it was more earth, like with shrubs and leaves and whatnot, it turned into more dirt kind of towards the house and the foundation. And I was outside my window of my bedroom and I could see like this huge paw print in the dirt. And I thought it was odd because we own two dogs, and even if they heard like a cat or even my dad tinkering around outside, they would, make those little gruffy noises dogs make when they scent something. And one of the dogs was a toy poodle, and those things are yappy. And, the previous night, I don't remember hearing them yap at anything. So that's what I found odd. And plus, they couldn't make that big of a print. It was pretty massive compared to their little paws. And, it couldn't have been a raccoon. So all of that together was odd to me with the dream and seeing the people. So that was really it. And the final encounter, I would say it was a couple of months later, and it was into the spring. So when that encounter happened, it was sometime during the fall. So this was when it was spring, stuff was starting to bloom, kind of come back to life, but the trees weren't yet producing leaves then. So I'm saying that just to kind of give a good time frame. There's a state park in Buffalo Gap, Texas. It's Abilene State Park. And right across the highway is Lake Abilene. It's a man-made lake. Back then, it wasn't owned by the state park, or I guess the government. So you were able to go in and out of it. She's still my best friend to this day. Her and I we would go to Lake Abilene and we would explore. And there was this spot there that I had found while kind of hiking, and we called it the meadow because it was flat. The trees surrounded it, and it was lush vegetation and sometimes wildflowers. And what we loved about it so much was, I'm not sure if it was because the trees surrounding it made it its own little basin or what, but once you stepped into the threshold of what we called the meadow, the temperature was just a couple of degrees cooler. And we loved that. We would sit there and talk or just listen to our Walkman or have photo shoots, being teen girls. And so this encounter, I had drove out there because I just wanted to go to the meadow and maybe draw and kind of get away from everyone. I liked exploring alone too, and I still try to do it. So I guess I kind of learned my lesson but didn't, I don't know. It's hard to say. But I had decided, all right, I'm gonna, see if I can find something further, something cooler to do our weird teenage girl photo shoots. So I wanted to escape and draw and just kind of get back with nature. So the meadow is, after you hit the entrance, you gotta go past a few little curves and winds, and there's different off-road paths. I guess like hunters would use them, or people, you would see little trenches of people getting stuck in the mud, or they would be out there mudding. So there were different small dirt roads off of the main road that I was on, and it would branch off into trails, I guess. And to get to the meadow, you would take like a small dirt road off of that main road. The main road wound around the lake. The lake's not very big either. And so I had drove to the lake, and there's this huge, I want to say it's an oak tree, but that was kind of the initial visual landmark that we made, that, oh, it's here. And that's where you could park your car to not be in the way of other people if they were driving, to find a spot to park. The shore of the lake back then wasn't too far, but it was still a little bit close enough. We've been through several droughts and whatnot, and the lake has replenished itself, so I don't know what it looks like now. I would love to go back and look at it and see if the meadow is still there, but it's been so many years, so that's why I'm trying to recall it as best I can. So, I had parked my vehicle, and atmosphere-wise, it was a nice afternoon. There was no wind. It was not too hot either. And so after I had kind of set up a little camp in the meadow, like I had a messenger bag, and I would have a drink, and I would have my Walkman, and I would have my keys in it, and I always brought a sketchbook. So after kind of doing my thing there, I decided to get up and explore the area. And see if I could find, the different places we could do photo shoot, our little teenage girl photo shoots. And just, I love exploring too. So that was another bonus on my part. And so I just put everything in my messenger bag and I left it there. And I decided to start going down a path that we had once gone down. And it was east of the lake. So if you were going to paint a picture in your head with the shoreline would be, and the way I was heading up with the shoreline, like not going north, but it was east then, just further out. But if you venture out more towards your left or the south part of where I was at, you would hit the edge of the property, the barbed wire fence, and then the highway. And then, skip over its state park lines. So, I was trying to keep this mental image in my brain so I wouldn't, suddenly end up on the highway and someone be like, there's a lost teenage girl. What is wrong? So the path that we were kind of used to exploring, I decided to go further, deeper than what we explored. And that's when the trees and the shrubs were getting thicker, and you would have to, kind of bend and shimmy your way through a few of the trees to make your way through. And I was doing that, and I was enjoying myself, looking at the trees surrounding me and kind of enjoying just the sounds and seeing different varieties of plants starting to get brought back to life as it was barely spring. And I don't know how far into my walk or minutes was when it started to feel off, and I started to feel watched. And so I figured maybe it's like a little critter or a deer. And I kind of shrugged it off. But there was a sound that I heard. Back then I joked that it was a moose. I heard a moose, but we have no moose in Texas that I know of. So it wasn't that, but it wasn't a growl. It was a weird noise, and it could have been an elk. My brother told me there's elk out here, and it could have been that. It could have been something else, but being a teenager and hearing that and just being little old me, I was like, okay, I don't know what that is. I'm going to turn around. So I'm walking back so I can find that familiar trail my friend and I were used to. And so that can get me back towards where I left my things at in the little meadow area. And as I'm making my way, I'm feeling watched still. And I started getting this weird spine when I had reached out to you, Vic. I had told you about the coyotes, and this was the past summer. As a reference, we were ghost hunting the Anson Lights. My big brother and his two other friends, and they're these big Neanderthal type, young adults. So the story is you turn around at a certain point and you flash your lights and the ghost light comes up. Well, they wanted to disprove that. So they decided to get out of the vehicle, and we were in my brother's pickup truck, and the guys wanted to head down towards the cemetery to, I guess, try to debunk it or whatnot. I just wanted to stay in the vehicle because we had heard coyotes earlier. So I stayed in the vehicle. And as they were going down the dirt road for these ghost lights, these coyotes, I could hear the howling getting closer. And it felt from the sound that they were making that they were circling the truck. And both the driver's side and the passenger side windows were rolled down, and he took the keys with him, so I couldn't roll them up. I was screwed, I thought, back then. And I felt hunted. You know, they weren't going to go after, 3 big 200 plus, young adult males when there was 150 pound, 4'11" female that they were probably smelling, as I think about it, so it made more sense to see what I was all about. And just that sense of dread and it's not panic, but it was something that I like to describe as like primitive, was to just kind of make myself feel small and try to go down into the cab of the truck to maybe not have the wind pick up my scent or keep picking it up. And that was just, my teenage brain thinking, I could maybe do this and whatever, these coyotes. So that was that. And back at, Lake Abilene, that was the same feeling I got as the coyotes, I feel like I'm being hunted or something's pursuing me. It's a very hard feeling to describe, but when I've heard other people try to describe it, it's one of those, I know what you're talking about moments. It's one of those recognitions. It's weird, but I was feeling that. And so being a kid, I watched a lot of animal shows on the Discovery Channel before it turned into whatever it is now. And I remember when they would talk about big felines, because this is probably maybe out here, besides coyotes, the largest predator we're going to get is a mountain lion. And I know that they are more the surprise ambush. And, if they follow you while you're doing your thing. And so I'm thinking maybe that's what's happening. I'm looking back at those shows and trying to piece it together, because when I would walk and I could hear my feet under the dead leaves and all that jazz, it was maybe a little distant, but I could tell something else was there. And it wasn't the usual lizards scampering because they heard you, or the little ground squirrels or anything like that. Those kind of make more of a chaotic, frenzied type scurrying noise in the dead leaves or brush or whatnot. But it felt like whatever was following me was sort of kind of keeping pace with me. So I would pause, then thinking I would catch it off guard, but I never saw anything. And in my head, I would be like, I just need to get to, the vehicle, or I need to get to the path so I can get to my vehicle. And I have, my mind's voice, like I know what my mind's voice sounds like. So like an intrusive thought, more of an intrusive voice was telling me to just get out. There was no gender to it or anything, so that I can recall, but I would hear "get out," and that pushed me further. And I remember that was weird, especially kind of being more open to the paranormal. I've never had an intrusive voice like that before. I've had my own voice, but to me, that's an intrusive thought. So that was really strange for me. And I made it to that path that I recognized, and then I could be a little bit more comfortable. I was a little bit more at ease making my way. I wasn't looking behind me, feeling as paranoid as I was before. And I see the meadow in the clearing, and I finally reach it, and that voice kind of seemed to echo "get out" once I reached it. And I bent down to pick up my book bag, or my messenger bag, book bag. It doesn't matter. But I turned around to see if I was still being pursued, or if maybe it was a deer, just to see. And this was a couple of yards away from me. This was a very large tree. It was very old, very big and tall. And on the bark, I noticed a discoloration. And as I kind of focused more on it, I saw what looked like a hand. And this hand it looked like a raccoon hand, but with very sharp claws, if you will. And as the hand went up to where the wrist would be, that's where I saw the fur, and then up, and then an elbow. And it looked like it had the arm around this big old tree, like it was kind of just holding on, but not so much, to keep it steady, as if you were to peek around from the tree to look over. That was the impression I got. But that's all I saw, was this large hand holding on to this tree, and the fur on it looked like a German Shepherd coloring type of color, or there wasn't much of a pattern. It was like that black raccoonish looking hand claw thing, and then with the wrist, and then the fur, and it was that color German Shepherds usually have. And I'm guessing it was shedding its winter coat, because it looked fluffy in some parts, but not so fluffy. You know how animals look when they're shedding their winter coat and their spring coats coming in. That's how it looked like. There was nothing unkempt, or just, it looked natural, like normal for it. So I kind of fully stood up, clutching my bag close to me, and it let go of the tree and disappeared. And I guess it went off into the woods. And I turned around and sprinted to my car. And my car was this bright red color. So to me, it was like this red beacon of escape, because it was fire engine red. And I, threw my bag in there, turned it on, locked the doors, like that would do me any good. But, to me, it made me feel safe, and I left. And ever since then, I haven't returned. I told my best friend, she wanted to go back there. And I said, no, something weird happened to me. I don't want to. I thought I heard a moose, and I don't want to go back. And so that was the last of it. And, I would love to go back, but that that was my encounter.
Wow, I'm so sorry to hear you had to go through that day. Sometimes not seeing something very well can be worse than getting a really good look. So I'm wondering, do you think it was more intense seeing that clawed hand than if the Dogman would have stepped out from behind that tree?
That's a good question because, then I think I would have, I probably would have been scared out of my mind and whatnot. And then looking back now, I would feel more of a confirmation. There's something, So that's a double-edged sword question.
Oh, it definitely is. The reason why I ask that is, in a lot of cases, your imagination can be a lot more frightening than reality can ever throw at you. So that's why I was wondering about that. Chris, we're about out of time here. I've got a lot of questions to ask you. Would you be up for coming back so we could do a Q&A?
Sure.
Okay, great. I was hoping you would say that. Well, let's do that. Let's bring you back on, do a Q&A so I can get to all these questions with you, and we'll just take it from there then.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it. And thanks again so much for your time there, Chris, and I'll catch you next week.